These are the culture shocks and key differences an American will experience when visiting Europe. How could you compare a continent with over 40 countries that speaks over 200 languages to one country like the United States? But believe it or not, I believe that you can. And I'm going to attempt to prove that in this video. This is some guy named Dave in Portugal, and I've been living in Europe for the past 2 years. I've traveled to over 20 plus countries in Europe, from the Netherlands to Bulgaria. And I post videos about everyday life in Europe on this channel every week, so make sure to hit the subscribe button if you would like to come along for the journey. If you are planning a trip to Europe, this video will be a perfect introduction on what differences you can expect so you can plan your trip accordingly. With over 200 languages spoken across Europe, Americans might be surprised by the prevalence of multiple languages. English may not be as widely spoken in some areas as one might expect, so language barriers can be a source of culture shock for Americans that only speak English. Now, if you are visiting the United Kingdom, it will be quite easy for you to get along just fine speaking English. Not promising that you'll be able to understand people in Scotland though.
Well, a shop that's no selling a lot of stuff. Somebody, my pal, said yesterday when I see that shop round the corner, it's on its arse.
For safety reasons and respect of the culture, I can't stress how important it is when going to a new country to be able to learn common phrases like greetings and general phrases to be able to blend in a little bit. Trust me, it's better to keep a low profile when traveling. Luckily, the sponsor of today's video can help with this. This video wouldn't be possible without today's sponsor, Babbel, which is one of the top language learning apps in the world. And it's a great way to be able to travel and navigate your way around a new country. Learning to communicate in a foreign country is important so you don't look like a lost tourist that can get taken advantage of.
¿A qué te dedicas?
¿A qué te dedicas?
Trabajo en un hospital.
Trabajo en un hospital. Babbel is actually scientifically proven to help you start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks. The lessons are designed by real language teachers. They teach real-world conversations to help you travel, talk about business, build relationships, and more. And if you're not fully satisfied, Babbel offers a 20-day money-back guarantee. They also offer live classes, and you get 2 free classes with your subscription. They offer multiple subscriptions to choose from, including a lifetime subscription. Click the link in the description to get 60% off your subscription today. Let me know in the comments which language you're interested in learning and why. In Europe, the duration of meal times tends to be longer, especially lunch. Dining is an important time for most Europeans to be social and really enjoy their friends and family. The quick pace eating on the go lunch isn't as common in Europe as it is the US, and you won't typically see people eating on the go like you do in places like New York City. In fact, in European cultures, you might get some side eyes and glares for doing so. Even in the more underdeveloped countries in Europe, dining etiquette is typically much more of a standard than in the United States. In Europe, portion sizes also tend to be smaller. Even when you go to American fast food restaurants like McDonald's in Europe, you'll notice the fry and drink sizes are much smaller in comparison to the ones in the United States. This also applies to coffee. Unless you are visiting a Starbucks in Europe, which I don't know why you would, you will likely have a hard time finding large coffees like you do in the United States. Although Europeans do drink a lot of coffee, it is usually in smaller caffeinated increments instead of tall can monster drinks with the equivalent of 4 espressos. Americans will also notice that free tap water in restaurants are usually not the standard. Most restaurants in Europe bring you bottled water, and sparkling is usually always an option as well. But when it comes to water, one thing Americans will have come as a shock is that a lot of water fountains in Europe are potable and sometimes contain artisanal well water with natural minerals that just taste amazing. Always make sure to look for a sign, as it will be clearly marked if the water is not for drinking. Tipping practices vary across Europe. In some countries, service charges are included in the bill, while in others, tipping is less common or at a lower percentage than the standard 15 to 25% in the United States. In many European countries, the relationship between the tip and the quality of service is less direct. Tips are often seen as a bonus for good service rather than a reflection of it. Therefore, tipping is generally less transactional and more based on social norms. Now, this is a very controversial and circumstantial topic. I think that many places in Europe expect Americans to tip, and it has become a standard. Now, I've met locals in different European countries that despise this because they don't want tipping this much to become the norm. But I've never met anybody that doesn't enjoy receiving a tip for a job well done, myself included, as I used to be a bartender and my life depended on it. So in Europe, when I receive good service, I tip. It's simple as that. But in Europe, when paying, you're usually not going to get a screen with a tipping option, so you would need to tip in cash or tell them that you'd like to increase the amount before paying with a card. Public transportation is highly developed in Europe, with extensive and efficient networks of trains, trams, buses, and subways in most major cities. High-speed rail systems like the TGV in France and the ICE in Germany connect cities and countries, making it easy to travel between them. Versus the United States, where public transportation varies widely by city and many areas rely heavily on personal automobiles. While major cities like New York, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. have robust subway and bus systems, smaller cities and rural areas may have limited public transportation options. In Europe, many European cities, car ownership is less common, and people often rely on public transportation, cycling, and walking. High fuel prices, congestion charges, and parking restrictions in city centers discourage car use. Versus the United States, where car ownership is widespread and personal vehicles are a primary mode of transportation. The country's vast size, suburban development, and limited public transportation options have contributed to this reliance on cars. European cities tend to be more compact and pedestrian-friendly, with well-planned public spaces. Many cities have historic cores where cars are actually restricted, and there is an emphasis on mixed land use, making it easier for people to walk and cycle. Where in the United States, many American cities are designed around car use, with sprawling suburbs and wide roads. Europe has a well-developed, high-speed rail network that connects major cities and countries, making it a convenient and eco-friendly alternative to air travel for inner-city journeys. The US has limited high-speed rail options and are often met with challenges due to the vast distances between cities and a lack of dedicated high-speed rail infrastructure. European transportation systems are often highly interconnected, with well-designed intermodal hubs that facilitate transfers between buses, trains, trams, and bicycles. Intermodal connectivity can be less seamless in the United States, with fewer integrated transport hubs making it more challenged to switch between different modes of transportation. European countries often allocate significant government funding to public transportation, and there's a commitment to continuous investment in infrastructure and innovation. In the United States, funding for transportation infrastructure can be inconsistent, with many projects dependent on state and local budgets. This can lead to disparities in transportation quality between regions. In some European countries, stores may close for several hours in the afternoon and may have shorter operating hours compared to the 24/7 availability of many American stores. This is especially true in the south of Europe, where many traditional restaurants close between the hours of 3 and 7 p.m. This also comes to a shock to Americans, where Europeans usually eat a late dinner around 8 p.m. or 9, versus the typical 6 p.m., 6:30 dinner that you see in the United States. So make sure that you do not leave yourself out of food at late hours in the night, as you may be out of luck. Europeans may have a different sense of personal space than Americans, with closer physical proximity during conversations being more common. For example, in Southern Europe, countries like Spain or Italy, it is common for people to stand closer to one another while talking. In many European cultures, cheek kissing is a common form of greeting, which may involve physical contact that some Americans could perceive as a breach of personal space. The number of kisses and the cheek chosen for the kiss can also vary by region. The perception of personal space in Europe is often shaped by cultural norms and context. In countries with a strong sense of community and social interconnectedness, people may be more accepting of close physical proximity. Whereas in the United States, I think in general, invading someone's personal space without permission can be considered impolite and sometimes even threatening. I would say in most European countries, there is a general preference for a slightly more formal and elegant dress code compared to the United States. This can mean that people tend to dress up a bit more for everyday activities such as going to work or dining out. Even going to the general store seems to be more of a formal event than it does in the United States. You typically don't see people in sweatpants or their pajamas out in public like you would in the United States. The rich history of Europe is evident in its architecture, with many older buildings and historical landmarks. This can be striking to Americans from a relatively young country. Walking on cobblestone streets in European cities can be a charming but disorienting experience for Americans, especially in contrast to the smooth, modern roadways in the United States. The cobblestones are a tangible reminder of the long history of European cities. But be careful and make sure you wear good tennis shoes, because you can often slip on these cobblestones very easily. The concept of time in Europe can be different from the US. Americans may find themselves amazed by how history is not just a topic of study, but a living presence in daily life. Ancient ruins and medieval town centers coexist with modern developments. Americans may experience culture shock when they encounter places that played pivotal roles in world history. Standing in locations where major events took place, such as battlefields or historical landmarks, can make history feel tangible. I've been living in Europe for over 2 years, and I still have to pinch myself that I live within miles of a castle from medieval times. One of the most obvious aspects of currency-related culture shock is the use of multiple currencies throughout Europe. Unlike the United States, which primarily uses the US dollar, European countries have their own distinct currencies. While the euro is a common currency used in many European Union countries, several European nations, such as the United Kingdom and Switzerland, have their own. This can be bewildering for Americans who are used to a single national currency. Constantly having to convert between the euro and other currencies can be mentally taxing. Americans may find themselves calculating prices in their heads to understand the value of items in US dollars, especially when dealing with other unfamiliar denominations. And high-value coins, such as 1 and 2 euro coins, are commonly used for everyday transactions. Americans may not be accustomed to using coins of such high value in their daily spending, meaning you could have a pocket full of coins that easily adds up to 15 euros. It's important to approach these differences with an open mind and a willingness to learn and adapt. Culture shock is a natural part of international travel, and in my opinion, just adds to the richness of the experience. If you want to see more videos about living in Europe and Portugal, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button because I'll be posting videos like this every single week on this channel. This is some guy named Dave in Portugal, and we'll see you next time.